Yeah, it should be starting any moment.
Cool.
Yep, we're live.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Yeah, I've just been told the sound's sounding good, so yeah, I think we're ready to roll. So that's all good. And how's things been going with you this week, John?
Really good. Yeah, we've put our first ever video of a seizure live this week on socials, which has traditionally been a bit of a controversial topic. Ironically, for an epilepsy charity to put somebody actually going through a seizure live on a social media platform, but the result's been incredible. We've done it with the person narrating what was happening to them and what they wish had happened over the top of it. I think it's been great seeing that sort of form of storytelling, making people feel seen, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive. So that's really great news. So yeah, really good week. How about yourself?
Yeah, just crazy. It seems at the moment everything is data, if more than anything else. So I did a deep dive into AI and kind of how people are using it as a part of this talk today, and I've got some really fascinating stats to share with you, John, but also everybody who's joining us today. So yeah, it's really interesting that I don't know if you know, but there was the World Economic Forum, and I'll touch about this later, but they said that they saw 90 million jobs changing or being removed from the market and 170 million jobs coming into the market. And actually something really interesting is happening. It's not as clear cut as that. So that's what I've been diving into this week. So so considering I'm a SEO, a bit different and really taxing and really interesting to kind of deep dive into that stuff. So yeah, it's good.
It's really interesting across the sector for NFP, how much everyone's talking about AI at the moment. So I went to a TechSmart conference in London this week, and it's the first conference I've been to for a couple of years, but the last one I went to was very much about talking about whether charities should or should not jump on the AI bandwagon. The emphasis of this one was that everybody is and everybody should. So we'll have some insights to share on that later on, I'm sure. But it's becoming very much a growing percentage of my day. If I could get an AI to work out exactly what percentage it would be, I'd be a rich man. But I don't have that yet. Yeah. I'm sure it's coming then.
I think the other thing is, the interesting thing is anybody who's using AI, you've got a balance between using AI, but also what effect it does actually have on the brain. Believe it or not, people are forgetting what they did because they relied on AI to create it. And then they're forgetting that, oh, did I write that in that email? Or did I write that report? Or did I do that? And that's because you've not been involved in the creative process, you're forgetting it. You're literally, it's just something that you've churned out, sent, and you've actually got no memory anchor within it. So yeah, right. So I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll start the presentation up and basically introduce today's episode. And last week we looked at the promise of AI. We looked at a deep dive into cancer research, UK. We looked at how they were utilizing AI from a marketing perspective, how they were utilizing it within their research perspective. And then we kind of broke down exactly how some of the things that we saw that was winning and some that we thought that was actually going to cause them problems in the future. But this time we're going to dig into sort of the reality side. We're going to look into almost the operational side of the third sector, and we're going to look at three core aspects: trust, safeguarding, and policy. Because charities are under pressure to explore AI, as John's just mentioned. Trustees are curious, staff are experimenting, funders are asking questions, but AI is bringing as many risks as opportunities. So we need to look into these opportunities, and we also need to look into these risks as well. Some of the worries that we've seen are that our research shows that 3/4 of workers are already using AI at work. Interestingly, 54% of bosses don't realize their workers are actually using the AI. And essentially 90% of all organizations, and that's charity and other sectors, 90% have something that's called shadow AI. And that's staff using tools without any permission or oversight or policy. So we'll be digging into that today. And I think the one thing that struck me, and one thing that I wanted to talk about today as well with John, is donors now want more integrity. They want to know that their data has been safeguarded, and also, the whole part of trust, and especially donation and supporting a charity, that trust has to be protected because people talk about brand building, people talk about how you build your visibility of your charity, but if you've lost that trust, it's going to take years just to rebuild that. So today we're going to explain how charities can experiment with AI. One thing they can't lose, obviously, is trust, but also we'll look at what's happening with shadow AI and what you can do in terms of policy to ensure that your charity is protected. Is there anything else you want to add to that as well?
No. I think just buckle in. It's a big episode, so let's jump in.
Can you see that, or has that gone all funny? Sorry.
Not quite yet. Just try again.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, you're all good.
Excellent. So I think the key aspect for us is that obviously we can see that there's this rise of what we call shadow AI, and we're going to look into that, see what the issues are, what this can cause for charities, and essentially what we've got to look at is how do you protect trust, what opportunities there are, and how every experiment carries a risk. One thing that we can see is 78% of businesses are already using AI, and this is by mid-2025, some of the stats that we're seeing now. 75% of workers are using AI at work, and 57% of employees are hiding the fact that they're using AI. And one of the biggest issues about this is that they're using AI for a whole manner of things to raise, to create legal documents, to create marketing campaigns, to add up accounts, or to maybe expand on there. Is there anything in the wider sector that you've heard about, John, from your perspective?
Yeah, so the numbers you mentioned there, around 77% of businesses using AI and 57% being aware of it. The numbers are even more stark when you look at the charity sector. So it's over 70% of charity sector workers are using AI, but only 40% have told their line manager. And the insight behind that, which I think comes from Salesforce.com, is that we're in a situation where charities are quite often shrinking their workforces at the moment due to real hard-hitting financial situations. So there's a fear of telling your boss in case your boss thinks you are capable of being replaced by an AI. So that's something to think about within our sector, is that we want people to have open conversations about this stuff, because if you don't, and all of your staff are using a generic version of ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, you could be accidentally sharing your IP with your competitors, or even worse, those chat bots, which we talked about in the last session, which are currently taking visibility away from your charities because they're reducing the reasons to click through to your website. So I think the takeaway I had from going to TechSmart this week was that every charity, regardless of size, should try and secure themselves a safe sandpit to play in. So that's a paid-for version of one of those products, so that then you don't get that leakage of IP through people hiding the fact they're using AI as part of their regular work.
I think one thing that a lot of employees are not actually realizing, and this was actually highlighted last month, was ChatGPT's answers that were made public or shared within an organization went live and were indexed by Google. So what you suddenly had was access to what people were actually typing in about their organization or competitor organizations. So you could literally find out by going through all of the search queries what people were talking about on ChatGTP. And then that was removed, and then it's happened in Grok, which is X's version of ChatGTP. That is now freely accessible. You can type in your competitors' companies or your own company, and you can see what people are actually asking about your particular company. So this data is shareable. And secondly, ChatGTP updated about 6 weeks ago their privacy policy. So it means that any chat that you have in ChatGTP is recorded on a server, and it's also accessible by the US government. And when it says US government, that's also intelligence agencies. How far could that actually go if it's sitting in a server? So anything that you're sharing about your own organization is freely accessible and could be used. So just
It's
bear
probably
that.
worth people thinking about that in the context of GDPR policies. So I know a lot of charities use GDPR policies that they've bought that have been sort of adapted to them. So it's the cheapest way of doing it. And a lot of those GDPR policies explicitly mention that GDPR does not cover the provisions under the Safe Harbor Act in the US. So that's probably worth looking into for most charities is to whether that's already a potential GDPR breach for them. So obviously any GDPR breaches of a certain scale need to be reported to the Information Commissioner in this country. So that's probably something people to have a look at as well.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think obviously charities can't get AI wrong, and this is because we're now living in an era where people don't trust everything. They don't trust the images that they see. They don't trust voices no more. Everything's AI generated. So what we are seeing is obviously that more people now are placing more trust into organisations to be truthful with them. They're demanding more integrity. One stat that I saw that donors 97% expect to be told the truth about where their data is being held. So that has to be really clear now. We're also seeing internally that we've got to ensure that there's now proper safeguarding internally. As you mentioned, GDPR, we've got the new Data Act that's coming in. All of these things have to be followed because there's just been a massive leak within the nursery sector, and we've just seen what damage that's done to one particular nursery sector, that they've suddenly released all the information of all the children and parents' details that go to their nurseries. So again, all of these things cause massive trust, and these can be existential threats to the charity and also the organisation. I mean, some of the stats that we can see here at the moment, as I say, 50% of workers are hiding their AI use. We're seeing shadow AI being utilised in marketing in 3 areas within charities: marketing, HR, and consulting roles. Basically, it's infiltrating everywhere, and it's not being guided, and it's not being implemented by an IT department or even heads of IT. So that means that it's generally a free for all. And like what John was just saying, without proper policies or proper safeguards in place, it can go wrong very, very, very quickly. So shadow AI is already here. It's already kind of implemented. People are using it, and you can see here that 78% are bringing their own tools into work, and 90% of firms have hidden AI use. So from your perspective, John, how do you see that an organisation would have to try and implement kind of protection from this?
I think the first thing is to have an open conversation about it. So one of the things that as I mentioned in the previous conference I went to a couple of years ago, was a big debate about whether charities on an ethical level should be using AI to replace human functions. So I think a lot of people who are using AI in organizations probably feel as though speaking up about their use of AI is potentially an unpopular thing to do. So I think part of the role of leadership in that situation is to provide a safe space for us to have those conversations and be honest about it, and say the fact that these things are things that we should be using. So one of the things that got discussed, because again, even though this conference I went to on Wednesday was very much about the idea of AI as being something charities should use. Some of the questions we heard were quite barbed, and they were talking about the environmental angle as well. So, we know that AI uses a tremendous amount of energy and water, and therefore, in addition to the human element of should you replace humans with machines, should we be increasing carbon footprint through the use of AI? And actually, we know that companies like Microsoft, for example, with Copilot, are working on technology that will enable the energy usage to drop within how they are putting together AI queries. And organizations also can do things to minimize the amount of carbon that they create. So, for example, you might think that you should ask please and thank you when talking to an AI. Actually, that's not necessarily needed in that, the AI is responding to your prompt rather than any pleasantries. So you can remove that from how you ask questions and reduce your carbon footprint from doing that. The other thing to say is that, there probably does need to be a grown-up conversation had at least with your middle management team, if not the whole organization, about what charities will look like within, 5 to 10 years' time. Because, as charities, we are supposed to spend our donors' money in the most efficient and best way possible. And that probably will mean that we need to look at replacing administrative roles or roles that can be replaced by AI generally with AIs so we can deliver more benefit back to our beneficiaries. So for me, the thing that charities must do, and they should be doing it quickly if they want to have a conversation about creating a safe sandbox environment, whether it's their own paid for version of these tools, is first of all get the conversation going about the fact that it's something that's okay. And it's also something that's natural, it's going to happen. So if you have people who are working in roles that could potentially be taken over by AI, you probably have a duty of care to tell them that now, rather than to be quiet about it up until the point where you have to make that decision, because it gives them the opportunity to retrain and rethink about how their skills can be adapted to a new world.
Some really good points in there, John. I think one thing that stood out for me is that kind of there's this hidden AI use, and most heads of those departments are not aware that it's being used, and you then have to question the reasoning why that staff member is using something like ChatGPT or whatever to supplement their work. Is it because they are, they've got too many deadlines? Do they need to, do they need to? Are they doing too much work for their role, or is it a question of, it's easier if I just bang it into this and do that? And one thing that I've been looking into at the moment is in January this year there was the World Economic Forum State of Jobs for 2030 of how job roles are changing. And the interesting thing for me about that was that they were saying that 90 million jobs are going to go, but 170 million jobs will be created with AI. But also as well as 35% of the skills that we actually use now are likely to go. So, you can already, even in marketing, which is obviously predominantly where we work, but in marketing, you can already see the writing is on the wall for people like graphic designers or kind of copywriters, you name it. It's things are changing already. And the interesting thing is, and I've just done an update of that World Economic Forum report, and what it's showing is rather than replacing people's roles, what's happening is people are using AI almost as an assistant within the workplace. And this is why I think shadow AI is so prevalent, is that actually it's always on in the background. People are asking it questions all the time. They're asking it to create, kind of, or create or interpret. I've heard people who are actually uploading, kind of documents from internally, and for interpretation by ChatGTP or to shorten things, and it really is, kind of, it's really quite scary that this kind of information is being shared outside of the organization. I think the other aspect of this is is it is going to take a massive change in terms of skill set and how we move and how organizations have got to move. An organization like Epilepsy Action, based on where AI is coming, has got a massive pivot, I should imagine, from a HR perspective, because it's
Well,
no
I
longer
mean,
that this is
I,
your role. It's kind of, this is your role plus AI. Is that
I
how
think
you
the
see
big
it?
challenge for us is to make people realize that the value in their work isn't the executable thing that you tick off your to-do list. So taking, for example, graphic design or copywriting, both of those skill set exist within my team. So at the moment, the designer or the copywriter gets their sort of chef's kiss moment when they finish the thing and it's beautiful and it's absolutely fantastic. I think the way those roles will move in the future is that the bit that actually was always valuable, which was strategic thinking. It was the thinking of, well, what does this design need to look like? What does this copy need to do? That becomes a really well articulated AI prompt, which is part of the reason why you want to be playing in a place which is safe. Because if you imagine you're a graphic designer or a brand manager for a really iconic brand, I know people like Nike or Apple, do lots of blogs through their employees on things that they've done, but the really special secret sauce is kept behind the scenes. And that's why I think you want to be playing in these safe environments, because if I'm thinking about how in 5 years' time we would write the world's best epilepsy campaign, you could probably start to do some of that using prompts, but you certainly wouldn't want your competitors to know about the insight you put into that prompt. So you wouldn't want it to know that, we know that the people who respond best to this sort of stuff are women age 50 based in Kent or whatever that insight might be. It needs to be kind of locked down to a degree. And also, ideally, I think what you want is prompts that look at your existing brand collateral, rather than trying to write everything from scratch each time. Otherwise, you will still seem quite generic. But I think it's a really interesting time, and I think, as I said before, we owe our colleagues the opportunity to understand that this technology is coming, and it's not us deciding as sort of the 21st century industrialists to do away with machine working, with manual working for machines in the Industrial Revolution. It's a thing that we have to do. It's not something that we are choosing to do to maximize profits. Organizations that don't adopt AI, I think, will find it very, very, very difficult. And part of the reason for that is that we know that charities are having to do more with less. That's common across every single report that we see. And I don't see a situation at the moment, particularly in the next 5 years, where doing more with less is going to continue to be a challenge, because there's no signs of us coming out of a difficult cost of living situation imminently. There's also no sign of the demand on charity services diminishing imminently. So when you're in that situation, we're having to do more with less. The reality is that we need to look at ways we can make some of the processes that we have that take some of the time that is stuff that we have to do take less time. So whether you're a 70-person organization like Epilepsy Action or a 500-person organization, there are things that you have to do that potentially could be automated. And I think charities should be looking at that. Otherwise, they're retaining employees and not giving them the foresight that their roles and their ways of working may need to change for them to continue to have jobs in the future.
I think also as well is, I was talking about trust being an existential crisis, but actually implementing and adopting AI and automation I think is as big as a existential crisis, because if you can't get leaner, and and that's not showable in your accounts or showable in expenditure, would I be right in saying that, from a trustee perspective, you could come under pressure that, if another charity is cutting their employee costs or cutting their expenditure, then then that's going to reflect on your team, your senior leadership team.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that as we know, the individual's capacity to give money to charities at the moment is really tricky because wages are depressed, inflation has remained high for the last couple of years. So the way that charities are growing at the moment, by and large, is by demonstrating their impact to a broader number of people, whether that is people who they wouldn't have traditionally thought as being within their orbit in terms of potential donors. They're having to say, well, if you give us £1, we'll raise 3, 10, £15 worth of benefit for somebody else who goes through something that you weren't aware of until recently, but actually is a really big deal that we're trying to do at the moment. Or you have to be looking to potential partnerships with maybe corporate sponsors or celebrities or whatever else. The one thing that gets corporate, celebrities, any other form of partner to really believe in your cause is your ability to turn small amounts of money or time or investment into things that are really tangible. So yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult to prove that if your competitors are doing that and being able to say, we've reduced the number of staff days we dedicated to administration in the last year by 1,000 days, and we reinvested those 1,000 days into things that made us more productive for the people we're here to support. I think it'll be really difficult for you to compete with potential corporate partners or celebrities for ambassadorship if you're not able to show that you're running a really lean ship, but also one that delivers a hell of a lot of value, which is ultimately what we're all here to do.
Yep, great points. I think again, this last sort of 2 months, I've been to a number of organisations and just looking at kind of what their policies are for AI adoption internally, and it's not just the companies that I've been talking to, but only 40% of firms have internal AI policies, and that's not a policy to stick on your website, but actually a policy for your employees of how, why, and when you should be using AI within the workplace, what it should be used for. The interesting thing is many of the firms that I did see policies, usually they were 10 to 12 pages long and full of so much legal jargon that most employees just ignored it and just thought, well, I don't know if I should be using it or I shouldn't. In fact, I don't know what to do and I'll just forget about it. So actually what happened was, that the policy actually didn't safeguard anyone, didn't safeguard the organization, and it didn't stop the employees. And in fact, there's a very worrying stat that I think it's around 54% of employees, even though they've been told not to use ChatGTP without prior permission, still use it within their workplace.
Yeah.
So
the exact statistics on this for charity are even worse than those numbers. So I can't remember the precise number now, but it's definitely less than 40%. And of the less than 40% of charities who have AI policies, quite a lot of those policies do exactly what you're saying there, Martin, of saying don't use it. And if you remember back to anybody who's old enough to sort of 2010, 12, when charities and other organizations brought in social media policies that said don't use social media, in reality, that did not stand the test of time. So I think, like you said, that's why you see this use of AIs going under the radar. And I think the other thing to say is that some of the people I spoke to this week, their version of an AI policy is an add-on to their data protection policy. And that's not really the same thing, in that, you can write things like, we will not share people's personal data with AI. But if that GDPR policy is only relevant to a proportion of your organization who's actually sending things out of the organization, it ignores the other people, which in most cases is the vast majority of the employees who could be accidentally leaking company secrets by accident. So, yeah, I think this is definitely something that I think all charity organisations should be looking at the moment, is making sure it's, like you say, understandable, but also that it's specific. That's important, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think it's worth having a chat, or at least having a brainstorm really about what kind of a good policy looks like. And this is what I've been working with a couple of organisations this month of, kind of where are we? And I think the biggest problem is obviously fewer than, you know, basically less than 30% actually offer AI training. And I mentioned this last week, is in one organisation that is heavily dependent on marketing, but they are actually an auction site. We've implemented in there an AI ambassador to actually implement AI training. So they're implementing safeguards, ensuring that particular data isn't accessible by ChatGTP, because it turned out that many of them had connected ChatGTP to their folders, their Google folders. So all the company's accounts was accessible by ChatGTP when they were writing documents, and that would appear. So essentially, I think the key start for me is about training and about open conversation, and I think that's always a problem in an organization, is talk to people and just let them be honest in, kind of, how are you using AI at the moment? What are you
That's a
using?
really important way of raising awareness, isn't it? Because somebody might not think that if they type into an AI, how should I deal with a disciplinary issue of somebody who has done this, that, and the other, that the AI will know where they work.
Yeah.
So, that will then mean that AI knows that BBC has now got an employee who has done some sort of horrible sexual harassment allegations again, or something like that. So, and that's the thing, is that people like journalists and people who want to just find information for fun, like hackers, will be looking through those logs, trying to find anything that's of particular use to, tarnish your reputation in some way. So it's definitely worth looking at.
No, absolutely. So the things that we've done is firstly, we created something called a golden rules board, and that was working with the staff to say, right, okay, what do you think is important? So things like no personal or in charities perspective, or donor data is accessible by ChatGTP or any LLM. We know that so on this personal usage of ChatGTP, is people were not only asking questions about the personal life, but then mixing that with also their work life, and kind of the outputs from that are heavily tarnished because ChatGTP has memory. So it's remembering all the conversations that have come through. And one good way of doing that is just ask ChatGTP, what do you think of me, yourself? And it'll tell you and remember and have a picture of what it thinks you are about. And sometimes it can be quite scary. So we have a golden rules. So no personal data on there, no company data on ChatGTP. Every output from AI has to be fact checked, because that's the biggest thing we're seeing, especially in the legal industry. I think at the moment there's about 12 cases in total, very serious criminal cases, that have been thrown out of court because the lawyers used ChatGTP and it made up cases that did not exist. And that was spotted by the judge and he threw out the case. So that's pretty, kind of spectacular. But even within your own organization, within marketing or communications, and you have to fact check that. That's a real big thing. And the other fact is only use approved tools. Now, there's multiple LLMs all getting released. And one thing I would say about AI is the tools that you are using now are probably not the tools you're going to be using in 3-4 years. That it's moving so fast and so rapidly. To move from one favorite LLM to another, somebody needs to be watching this. There needs to be a central source, an AI ambassador, or somebody, an IT member needs to be aware of what tools you're using, because there's things like Manus or DeepSeek that are being produced by China. There's other LMs that are produced elsewhere, and there are a lot of conversation at the moment of where that data is going when you're entering it, and so you have to be really careful of what you're doing there. I think also from our perspective is start training staff about safeguarding, and that safeguarding has to demonstrate practical scenarios rather than theory. It has to really show them exactly how information can be used and how information can be, like the examples I gave earlier, where there was the leak where ChatGTP data was indexed by Google and shown to everybody. That could have caused a lot of problems with any sector, let alone the charity sector. Is there anything you want to add to that, John?
Just to say, one of the things that I know a lot of charities struggle with is there some sort of template for thinking about all the data that you gather as an organisation? And on the ICO website, I think there still is a record of processing activity, or a ROPA document that you can download, which is just quite useful in terms of getting you to think through all the different systems that you have, what data that you gather, what purpose for that data you gather, how long you hold it for, who owns it, and what risks it may pose. So if you go to the ICO, you should be able to find resources under the GDPR section. And again, it's a record of processing activity, or a ROPA, you're looking for.
Excellent. Yeah, safeguarding and reputation risks. As we say before, 1 in 5 organisations have had a shadow AI breach on average. Those organisations have been fined up to 4.6 million because they've had a breach of data. One of those was Samsung, whose developers decided to enter the script for some software that they were working into ChatGTP and got it to rewrite it, and it became accessible to everybody in the early days, and they were fined for that. Also as well is bad outputs. Things like outputs can be biased, especially within DeepSeek or Manus. They can be, if you ask either of those two LLMs, they will not say anything against the Chinese government or things like Tiananmen Square, which I'm sure most people are aware of. But all of these things are biased. Recently, X, which owns Grok, has said that Grok has now been released to be more right-wing orientated. So we're now having LLMs that are being manipulated in such a way to the ownership. So whether it's the Chinese government or whether it's Elon Musk or whoever, we're not dealing with a central source of truth. We're actually dealing with a manipulated sense of truth now. And I think the other thing for me is reputational risk. And trust is always monitor as well what ChatGTP is telling you, and monitor how your organization is represented within ChatGTP or Claude, because what we are seeing is more and more reputation management. And at Heart and Works, we've just taken on a client who's been badly damaged by ChatGTP because it's obviously got inputs from forums, from websites, from documents, and unfortunately they've been classed as a negative company, so they're not appearing. And also as well as ChatGTP saying a load of knowledge that's not correct. So also as well for charities, it's not only what you do internally, but also keep checking how ChatGTP sees the organisation as a whole. Anything from your side, John?
No, I think that's really comprehensive. I agree with all of it.
And again, trust. Things are moving very, very, very quickly. And this is, I think, the key thing, the key message is what we are seeing is over this next 5 years. I think it's going to be quicker. Is things are going to move incredibly quickly. So HR teams need to really get onto this and really understand what is happening. And as John mentioned earlier, is what is everybody's role? how is AI supplementing that, and how does an organization or a charity actually pivot towards this new future? Because it's going to come very, very quickly. As I mentioned earlier, the World Economic Forum said 92 million jobs will be displaced, 170 million created. However, we are going to lose 35% of the skills that we're currently using as well. For charities, as I say, trust is real currency. That's what is on the line here for me, because any of these things, any data breaches, people using ChatGPT or LLMs for a particular reason, could all ultimately cause a downfall. And to be honest, I'm half expecting that we'll see not just a charity, but we'll see some organisation be really exposed, and it's only a matter of time before we see something incredibly quick. And then secondly, with donors and beneficiaries, I think it's really well worth now really banging the drum in your communications, in your newsletters, in how you handle data and how you handle this kind of information. I think that trust has got to be built further. And if you are using AI, an AI policy on your website is a very clear signal of how it's been used and what you're using it for. But then secondly, have dedicated pages or areas where you talk about where you use AI, and really break down how protective you are of information of your customer, donors or beneficiaries. Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
No, I think the only thing to sort of jump in what we said last time is about the fact that because AI is so broadly used at the moment, I think not only are service users and donors and beneficiaries worried about their data not being managed in the correct way, which they were previously worried about before AI became a big thing. I think there's now quite a lot of AI fatigue within audiences because so much of what you see on TikTok is so obviously AI. So I think part of the way in which I think you need to be thinking of operating is how do you retain that unique voice? So how do you tell stories in an empathetic way, in an interesting way? And again, if you go back to the point of why you would want to adopt automated processes, if loads of your time currently is being spent on managing queues of work, responses to inquiries or complaints or whatever, using an AI there to sort of create some shape and size around what it is that you're dealing with might give you teams more time to work on that content that is truly differentiating and interesting to audiences. So I think it's worth doing that as well.
Yeah. So next steps for people. I mean, again, my sort of recommended steps for is firstly is audit, a simple audit of possibly using an anonymous survey of your staff of where people are using ChatGPT, what models they use. I would make it anonymous, and that's what we've done with other organisations, just to kind of get a grip of exactly where people are. Draft a very simple, plain English, 2-page policy for staff. Again, it doesn't have to be over legalised at this point, but just try to pull something together, something that gets your staff involved as well as what they think is important to safeguard and protect. Look at training teams, a small, again, we've done this in small little groups where we've talked to the marketing team or the HR team or the CRM team about AI safeguarding, simple rules, explanations, put things in place rather than just sending out a 12-page legal document of this is our AI policy. And then secondly is treat AI like GDPR. It has to be reviewed. I've put here review risks and policies annually, but I would actually argue with AI, it has to be at least 6 months because things are moving so quickly that what is happening now could be drastically different in 6 months. So every 6 months, review AI usage within the company and adjust policies as well. Is there anything else you think you should add to that, John?
I think the only thing I would add is that AI is happening. So, the best leaders will be the ones who create um, a controlled sense of adoption rather than it just happening by accident. So, going back to that, 2-page policy, the worst thing you could put in there is that we as an organization don't support AI. It's going to happen. So you've got to get kind of, some parameters in play in terms of how that's going to happen. And in addition to that, I think what I'd suggest people do is, once you've got that open conversation going, do a workshop where you think about how it could be adopted. Because if you imagine, if you go back to social media policies, where you couldn't use social media, the employees who were told not to do anything on social media still went away and did it anyway, and they did it without your authority and without your leadership, and therefore took it in whatever direction they wanted to take it in. So I think it would be good for your senior leaders to have conversations about where the adoption might happen with staff, and then work with staff to prioritize which areas are adopted first. And hopefully that will give people confidence that AI can be adopted successfully into your organization in an ethically sound and safe way.
Excellent, John. Thank you for summing that up. Yeah, it's been a bigger. I think we could have easily done another 15-20 minutes. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's such a big topic, and it just seems to be. And I'm sure for you it's even worse because you've got this bigger organization where these things are hitting you every week, changes are happening every week, and it's just trying to work out what is the most important thing to tackle.
Yeah, and as I said, it's the really unusual combination of people being stretched further than ever before because of the cost of living crisis, meaning an increased demand for most charity services, the NHS being in crisis, meeting a bigger demand for everyone's services, and the scarcity of time and money. So, and against that, you've got people who are also saying ethically or environmentally you shouldn't use it. But actually, I think it's, as I said, it's a conversation that I think has got an inevitable conclusion in that it's going to happen. But it doesn't mean that those conversations don't, cause a degree of discomfort. But I think the job for us as charity leaders is to try and get those conversations to happen. Because if they don't, and you have a bunch of people who truly don't believe in the potential, or people who believe in it too much, or a combination of those two things, it could really do bad things for your culture. So I think it's important for us to create a safe environment to have those conversations.
No, absolutely. Right. So, interestingly, viewership's going up now.
Yeah.
But I've not received any questions at the moment. But I just want to say thank you, John. It's been really insightful hearing from yourself and the experiences that you've seen and heard, and it's great to share it with other people within the third sector as well. So we are back next week with quick wins. So some quick wins about AI, not just for marketing, but across the whole spectrum. So we'll be back here on this at 2:00 again, but with quick wins with AI and the third sector.
Perfect. If anyone's got any questions watching this, because I appreciate the fact that Martin and I know each other really well, the conversation does tend to go around. So it might be that people have got to go away and think about what it is that we've attempted to say before they can come up with their own questions. Just drop them as questions on the YouTube chat or on LinkedIn, and just we'll get back to you, or reach out to us individually, whatever's easier for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John, and I'll catch up with you next week.
Brilliant. See you soon.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Cheers. Bye.